became obsessed with hiking not long ago when I was already quite mature. I started by watching YouTube videos of survivalists building shelters in the forest out of clay and sticks, sleeping on the ground, and surviving by opening a can of stew with their bare hands and starting a fire with a spoon. But I wasn't drawn to such extreme adventures, so I started small. First, hiking in the Moscow region, then the Vladimir region, then the Ryazan region, mostly in the woods, and mostly alone. I don't like organized groups. In my opinion, the best way to unwind from the work week is alone and in nature. Little by little, I bought some gear, a backpack, a sleeping pad, a tent, an awning, a wood-burning stove, and other small joys of an indoor camper. I'm not afraid of the forest. I've learned to navigate well using a compass, so I don't need a GPS. There are plenty of protective equipment and special suits for ticks. And I'm not afraid of animals. I believe the most dangerous animal is man. And the further you get from populated areas, the more peaceful your overnight stay will be. This time, a friend of mine talked me into going on a hike. He was absolutely crazy about all things paranormal and suggested we take a walk in the swampy forests around Cherusty. He said the place was interesting, paranormal, and there used to be a temple. People are disappearing there now. Well, I laughed. Of course. Whatever the kids play, so to speak. For me, I'd go to hell, as long as it's passable. And people disappear in any forest, unfortunately. And almost every mushroom season, actually. We picked a weekend. I got my gear ready and got ready. The day before, this guy called and said he couldn't go, saying his wife wouldn't let him. Oh, well, I understood. A loving wife makes sure her husband doesn't wander around in swamps. I don't blame him, but I didn't want to cancel the trip. I'll go into the forest alone. I'm used to it. It's a new place. It'll be interesting. And so, the next day, the commuter train was already taking me away from Kazansky station. The ride was long. I mostly dozed while my backpack with my gear, with a mat strapped to it, settled comfortably on the rack. I planned to take a walk, see the local church, go deeper into the forest, and spend the night there, and then head back the next morning. The journey was uneventful. I reached Cherusty, walked a bit, stopped in to pray at the church, and with God, I headed into the forest. At first, the walk was quite comfortable. The paths were well trodden, the scenery beautiful, the forest picturesque, and the weather was fine, sunny, but not hot. I walked through the forest, which became increasingly dense until I was well away from any settlements. I didn't want to be disturbed at night by idling locals, especially those under the influence. I wasn't worried about getting back. My trusty Finnish compass never let me down. I could get out of anywhere. I generally think you can't do anything in the forest without a compass. All those fancy GPS devices and phone maps are unreliable, but a compass never lets you down. Finally, as the sun began to set, I came across an impassable swamp. I didn't dare cross it, so I turned back to search. I looked for a suitable clearing for the night and found it. It was a nice, dry spot in the mixed forest. Underfoot, there was a thick carpet of last year's compacted leaves. The spot was quiet and secluded. I pitched a tarp between two trees. I always do this. It adds a cozy touch to the campsite. I cleared the area of branches and pitched the tent. I didn't light a fire. The autumn was dry and warm. There hadn't been any rain in a while, so you never know. I have a tin wood-burning stove for this purpose. You can enjoy the crackling fire and cook food. but without having to chop wood and light a fire. Soon, the burning twigs in the wood-burning stove were crackling cheerfully. A sweet, smoky aroma wafted in, and in the lid of an army mess tin next to it, buckwheat and canned stew were warming. I munched on a sandwich and savored the aromatic tea. This is the very moment I go hiking for. A moment of oneness with nature, completely separated from the city noise. Dusk was falling in the forest. One flashlight, a Chinese convoy, lay close at hand. The other, a cheap headlamp, I attached to a tree to illuminate my clearing. It was nice, very nice even. As darkness fell, the forest came alive. Here and there a twig would snap, or the rustle of fallen leaves would be heard. These were nocturnal creatures, emerging from their hiding places. I had long since become accustomed to these sounds, and they didn't cause me any alarm. Quite the contrary, all this commotion indicated that the forest animals and birds had accepted my presence and were not afraid. The most important thing, before heading to bed in the tent, was to remember to tightly pack your food and put it in a pot, which you hang high in a tree. Otherwise, by dawn, all the food would be eaten and scattered across the clearing. I had a meat porridge for dinner and was enjoying the peace, listening to the sounds of the forest. Suddenly, my ear caught a sound that shouldn't have been there in the forest at night. I heard soft female singing, not even singing, but a purring, like a woman humming a lullaby. What the hell? I jumped up, turned on the flashlight, and listened. I tried to figure out where the sound was coming from. It seemed to be coming from the direction I'd come from, having stumbled upon the swamp. I wondered what kind of woman could be singing a lullaby at night, in the forest, in the swamp. A nasty, sticky fear began to creep into my soul. Maybe my phone was playing a video. I'd experienced something like that once before. I shone my flashlight into the forest thicket, but the sound didn't repeat. Deciding that I was experiencing auditory hallucinations from the silence, I calmed down a bit. I've heard that happens to people. My hearing couldn't adjust to the silence after the city noise. I sat down on a log again and sipped my tea. By this time, the forest had completely darkened. Pitch blackness had settled around my campsite, dispelled only by the cold light of a cheap headlamp. After checking my phone, I snapped a couple of photos, took a selfie with the tent in the background for my social media account, and decided to get ready for bed. The return trip lay ahead in the morning, and I needed to recharge my batteries. After putting all the food in my pot, I hung it from a tree branch and crawled into the tent. I left my shoes in the vestibule, zipped up the heavy zip, and packed my sleeping bag. It was getting chilly, but the warmth was still there. The sleeping bag felt incredibly cozy. After fiddling with my phone a bit more, I plugged it into the power bank and went to bed. I woke up with a vague sense of unease and impending danger. I opened my eyes and lay in the darkness for a while. The pale disk of the moon hanging over the forest was visible through the tent fabric. I reached for my phone. It was already fully charged, and the clock read 2:15, a number I remembered well. And then I heard footsteps, heavy like someone treading in boots, and the crunch of branches. That's all I needed. Could it really be a moose? These animals have very poor eyesight, and it wouldn't be a problem for them to fly into my tent. And they can weigh up to 1/2 a ton. Should I scare them with a firecracker? What if they panic and run and trample me? No, let's wait. I sat up as much as the tent's height allowed and began to listen. Meanwhile, heavy, leisurely footsteps were approaching my shore. Definitely a moose, or maybe not. Who then, after all? There couldn't be anyone out here in the middle of the night. The footsteps grew closer, and then I realized it wasn't a moose. A moose walks on all fours. You can hear that clearly. Plus, it brushes against the tree branches, making a noise and a cracking sound. But here, someone was walking on two legs, someone very large and heavy. Each heavy step echoed loudly in the silence of the still forest. As the footsteps approached my campsite, the unknown visitor stopped, and then a loud clanging sound and a dull thud were heard. It was the pot with the remains of food hanging from a tree falling. I became afraid. I wanted to close all the zippers in the tent. I understood perfectly well that a tent wasn't a shelter, but just a stretched piece of fabric. But it gave me a sense of security, albeit false. Climbing out to see who it was that had come to visit me was terrifying. Frantically searching my backpack for the Spaga pepper spray, I hid and waited, my stomach clenching with fear. For some reason, I was absolutely certain the creature behind my tent flap wasn't human. And suddenly, I heard it humming again. A woman's voice was distinctly purring a lullaby. It was very close, it seemed, right outside the tent flap. And then, someone tried to open the tent flap from the outside. I saw the zipper slider twitch in the dim light. "Who's there?" I shouted, surprised at how pitiful my voice sounded in the silence. The movement stopped. All I could hear was my own heavy breathing. Then someone tugged hard on the zipper slider and it began to open, slowly, with a distinctive sound. "What do you want?" I shouted. "Mem I, came the answer, dull, like from a barrel, scary. And then I began reciting the Lord's Prayer in response, first in a whisper, and then louder, at the top of my voice. The words jumbled, I stumbled, but I continued. When I finished, I began reciting again. Then I fell silent, catching my breath. There was silence outside, as if nothing had happened. I waited. The seconds dragged on like hours, but nothing happened. And the most interesting thing was that the oppressive feeling of danger that had woken me up was gone. I realized that if I just sat in silence and waited, I would go crazy. So I turned on my phone and found an episode of the TV series Kitchen. A mustachioed cook ran across the screen, throwing chicken and calling everyone butts. It was funny. My anxiety gradually subsided. There were no strange sounds outside the tent. A sense of peace returned. So, watching the show, I quietly fell asleep. I woke up when the rays of the dawn sun were already filtering through the tent fabric. All the fears of the night had gone. I crawled out and discovered that my cooking pot, which I had hung on a tree, was lying on the other side of the clearing, as if someone had thrown it with great force. There were no other signs of the night visitor. If it weren't for the cooking pot, I would have been absolutely certain I'd dreamed the whole thing. Later, when I returned home, I repeatedly replayed what had happened in my mind. What was it? A nightmare? Sleep paralysis, maybe? Or did I breathe in some fumes in the swamp? I still have no answer to this question.